Hey, so I told you I had a story to tell. Okay, so here goes. Earlier this year, I decided to sell a rental property that I had invested in. And that was, even having that property was a real risk for me. Calculated, very calculated risk. But I live on a pretty lean budget. And investing in property is sketchy, right? So anyways, the market had turned and things were selling well. This is 2022. And so I decided to sell the property and recover my money up front rather than over the years that I would have it for rent. And I expected that sale to happen quickly. I mean, who can't sell a house in 2022? You could sell an anthill. And so over the course of 6 months, I had 5 offers on the house. Not just offers, but contracts. And each time the contract fell through for some reason. So again, that's significant because the temperature in 2022 with selling houses, like, they sell before the sign is up in the yard. So I knew something was different about this. So that is what's not different for me. Because I feel like everything that happens to me, everything in my life, is tied to something that I probably don't see on the front end. I also see God in everything. And so I kept feeling like, okay, well, he's up to something. There's a timing element here where he's doing something and I just don't see it. I also was concerned, like, maybe I'm not doing what God wants me to do with this property. And I have a couple trusted friends that I talked to. I shared with my small group. My heart was to do whatever God wanted me to do with that property. I entertained some nonprofits, ministries that help other people, particularly in the area of housing. And I thought, well, maybe I'm supposed to. At one point, I stood in my front yard and I just said, God, am I supposed to give it to them? Am I supposed to give somebody this house? And I think I would have done it if he said so. I want that to be the case. It isn't what he said, anyways. And so I just kept plugging along. And it was weird. And it was starting to get nerve-wracking. So in July, I decided to take a vacation. And for vacation, I went to Mahaffey Camp. In fact, if you've been watching in the background of this video, that's where I am right now. As I was actually walking right here. This is Kings Highway. And I was walking up here to go to my friend April's cottage. This is her cottage. Oh, look how cute. And I got a text message from my agent. And she said, we have an offer. And I thought, okay, great. And she sent the paperwork, which you can get on your phone these days, So I said, do you want me to sign this? And she goes, no, you might want to wait. She goes, I have another one. So all these offers that I had over the course of the 5 months, 6 months, they were much smaller than what I thought the house was going to sell for. And, you know, I'm willing to be wrong. That wouldn't be anything new. But I really thought that the house would sell for the number that I had in mind. So I waited. I went and visited April. And when I left her house, the other offer came through. And I was standing actually right here in this spot when I looked at my phone and saw the offer. And it was actually the number that I had thought all along was appropriate for the house. It was also a cash offer, and it would close, you know, real quick. And so I stood in this spot, and I was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed because I knew, like, it had something to do with timing. It had something to do with timing. And I'm not used to having chunks of money or money in the bank, you know. And I I uh, I was standing here with my phone in my hand, and you know it's different all of a sudden when you have a little bit of money. It wasn't a ton, but it was enough for me to do something, you know. And I know I didn't need to decide, but I couldn't stop my brain from thinking about it. And so when I pray, I talk out loud to God, and I said, "What do you want me to do?" You know, I don't have much put aside, like for the future. Like we think about retirement or you know caring for yourself, and I thought, man, maybe I should put this away for my future. And I said that out loud. And immediately, like immediately, I heard him say, "Those kids are your future." And I know what it sounds like when God talks to me. Like it's not audible, but it's a different voice in my head. It sounds different, and it comes with a spiritual emphasis that I cannot explain. And when he said, "Those kids are your future," immediately I saw in my mind's eye the image of my two grandsons. And I couldn't move. I was still stuck in this spot. So here I am, like this moment in time that I had waited for selling the house had now converged with this spiritual moment where God was very definitive about my family being my future. So I stood here, I lifted my head, and I just looked around. And as I was standing, that's what I saw. I saw this little brown cottage for sale. And it took my breath away. Because if you know me, that's how God does things in my life. I don't know why. I can't tell you why he moves the hands of time to have me standing in the right place at the right time. But that's what he does. He's done it over and over and over. The idea of having a cottage at Mahaffey Camp was overwhelming for me. It was, this is a really special place. My family had a cottage here for over 4 decades. I grew up here. It was such a significant idea that I was afraid to entertain it. So I walked away. I just walked away from the little brown cottage. And I went back to my camper. I was here in my cute little camper. And I said, I can't think about that. Well, I couldn't stop thinking about it, is what happened. And so the next day, I found out who owned the cottage, and I took a tour, and I began to daydream about what that would be like. Being at Mahaffey Camp, looking at cottages for sale, is like going to the grocery store when you're hungry. Like, it's got all the feels for me. And I am determined not to be a woman who makes impulsive or emotional decisions. And so, um, 2 days later, I packed up and went home. And I thought this will pass. Well, it didn't pass at all, actually. And I kept thinking about it. And so while I was home, I decided to find out what other cottages were for sale. I mean, let's just look, you know? Oh, hey, we got to stop right here. See this one? There we go. My phone is tied to a paint stick. That's the cottage that my family owned forever. Okay, moving on. Anyways, so I was home and I was looking online at whatever cottages were for sale, and there were a couple. And so 2 weeks after camp had ended, I got in my car and drove back up here to look at the cottages that were for sale. And I found one that I really liked. And it was hard for me, it was still hard for me to imagine owning it. It was hard for me to feel like I deserved such a gift. Like, there's crazy, horrible things going on in the world right now. And God's giving me gifts. And I know He's a good Father. And He gives you stuff just because He loves you. Because we don't deserve it. But it was hard for me to swallow getting such a good thing. So I talked to a friend, Jolynn, and she said, just keep taking the next step. Just keep doing the next thing. And if God shuts it down, He shuts it down. Now, I wanted to involve my family, of course, so we made a road trip. My daughter, Molly, my sister, Julie, her husband, Scott. We all came out, met with a contractor, went over some things. My son, Levi, would check in with messages. Hey, any news on the cottage? Ultimately, I had gone through all the doors that were open. The only thing left to do was make an offer. The owner was Ron and Ruth Julian, and they've owned this cottage for lots of years, just like my family owned theirs. And you can't put a price. You can put a price on wood and bricks, but you can't put a price on your family coming together in a place like this. There's no price tag for that. And there were moments where I felt I was just overwhelmed. That's all. Anyways, to the punchline. So that's it. That's my cottage. It's cottage 117 on Hebron Place. And I'm going to name it Divine Romance. Because it's a gift from my best guy, Jesus. Jesus gave it to me. You got to come visit.